welcome to SharePoint Power Hour. I'm Laura Rogers, and this is our weekly show that we do Wednesdays 11 Central. I've got Joelle Jobson here. Say hello. You're on mute.
Hello.
And it's good to see you all here. The fun thing about having a live show is that you never know what's going to happen. We always have we have a great conversation here in Slack, in our Slack channel. And if you're looking to join Slack to talk to us during the show, there is a link in the description in this YouTube video to go ahead and join that. And so it's fun having a conversation the whole time we're doing Power Hour Live. And also, you never know what kind of fun technical challenges we'll have, either with audio, video, or with whatever I'm demonstrating. So, because these are just unedited, it's just, we wing it sometimes. Now sometimes these are more scripted and planned out than other times. Usually when Joelle does it, it's more planned out. She spends time getting it just right. And this one is going to be definitely more towards the side of completely winging it. But the topic today is Microsoft Flow actions that have to do with flow and flow management. So we're going to be talking about we have their flow management actions and flow admin actions. So we're going to be looking at those and talking about them and trying some stuff out and testing. Just and thinking about different cases and situations where you'd want to use different ones of these. So I'll go ahead and get started and share my desktop. And let me see. You can see that I have a list of flows here. Let me go ahead and maximize that. All right. So when I go to create a new flow, you can see that I've got the ability to, I'm just gonna use like a schedule, just because I really just want to show you the actions having to do with flow management first. So my trigger is just going to be a schedule, or I could have created a manual one. So then I just type flow here. So then flow is going to, it's going to show me these two things listed here. So I've got flow management and Microsoft Flow for admins, and those are the things we'll be talking about. So you can see with flow management that it's going to give me just this long list of things that I can do having to do with multiple flows. So as an admin, you think about, or if you think about just kind of managing the flows that you have, but also as an admin, think about being able to have tighter control of flows. But then think about like the logic in your flows. Sometimes when you're building more complex business processes, you might need to do things like run another flow. So let's see, there's turn on flow, there's modify the users, there's things like managing other flows and getting flows. But there's also going to be like triggering another flow. I've seen that one in here. Anyway, so the logic in your flow is sometimes if you have a couple of really complex ones that you don't want to have all the complexity in a single flow, you just want people to like trigger something and then have it, just depending on a condition, run a completely different flow. Instead of having one big giant complex one, then that's possible with that. And let me see. Okay, so one of the more useful, I'm going to start with just kind of looking through some of these, and then I'll talk about, there's some templates. There's definitely one template that I've tried out and I've run. And Joelle, did you come across like more than one template out there that Microsoft's put together having to do with these?
No, I'm sorry. I tried
It's
searching.
okay. It's okay.
Can't find one.
Because Microsoft has actually provided a completely already built template that actually makes use of a whole bunch of these, that gives you a good example of, what you can do. And it's not just flows, it's got Power Apps too, Power Apps admin stuff too in it. All right, so we've got the ability to completely create new flows, and I'm gonna actually go click on a few of these and look at just some of the things that it does, and then we'll go, just like actually run a few of them. So all of these flows are going to start with environment. Now, if you have a pretty simple tenant that you don't have a lot of the higher end plans and you're not using multiple environments, you might just see a single thing in here. So you can see I've got a couple of other test environments, but this is my main environment. It's usually going to be like the name of your tenant. Laura Rogers is it. My tenant, this is my Wonder Laura tenant. So this is my test tenant. So it just says Laura Rogers, but yours is going to have the name of your company. So then I'm actually creating a new flow. And just stuff, that's just like a description of it. And then do I want to automatically have it started when I create the flow? And look at this. This is like a whole list of multiple connections that you can have in your flow. So you're probably going to want to, this is going to need to be something that you will be able to get. You'll probably have to obtain this information or create connections. So it needs to have information about connections that this new flow is going to have in it. So there are other actions in here that let you create connections too. So I'll go ahead and show you those so I can show you how this would be used together. Flow management, create connection. So again, select environment. Do any of you in the room, in the chat, have multiple environments that you all use, or have like big implementations where you actually do have flow management and multiple environments and, control like all the different flow makers and admins and all the different environments? I don't see, a lot of our customers are small and medium-sized businesses, so they don't necessarily have or need to do any of that. But yeah, Todd says, to use these, does the account have to be a Flow or Power Apps admin? Yes, some of these, the flow management for admins, I believe, but I'm not sure about the one where you just get your own flows. Do you have to be an admin just to be able to create this flow management connection in the first place? Larry, are you saying yes, you do? Oh, that's a good one, Joelle. So Joelle actually posted a link to one in chat that says, notify me when the number of Microsoft flows is about to reach 250. Now, why would you do that? You would do that because Flow, actually they have multiple plans. They have Flow Plan 1 and Plan 2. And let me go ahead and show you that. So yeah, so here, Larry says you use multiple environments. Good, okay. So Flow for Office 365, Plan 1 and Plan 2, this kind of looks wonky in this resolution, but the idea behind that one is that you actually get a certain number of flows for free runs per month per user. So you could have it look at, so in that example, it just says 250, but you could put it at 700 or something like that. But that's going to let you know basically when you're about to get to a certain other licensing level, maybe. So you want to control not having to get charged more, right? Okay, so maybe if I have time towards the end, Todd Flint, we can talk more about that concept of environments and what they're for. Okay, so create a connection. This is kind of neat because look at this. You have all these hundreds of connectors that you can use in Flow. They're all listed here. So you have just this insane number of connectors, like MSN Weather. I'm pretty sure I don't already have an MSN Weather connector. So now that I've created a connection, let's see what else I can do. Can I get a connection? Let's see. I'll type Flow here. go to flow management. I'll say narrow it down a little bit, see what I can get. Get connector. Sean says, does triggering a flow from inside another flow count as 1 or 2 runs? Well, it would count as the flow that runs initially would get triggered, and then the other flow that gets triggered would count. I'm pretty sure. I've never tested that. I've never had to worry about my number of runs of flows, so I've never tested that, but technically they're both getting triggered. So just another side note about that whole licensing thing, though, and the number of flows is, remember, in Power Apps, there's a lot of logic you can do straight from Power Apps without having to use flow at all and not having it count against you. And now we did a whole other Power Hour about sending an email straight from Power Apps without using flow. So just keep in mind when you're doing like your whole business solutions with Power Apps and flow that you can do things like create SharePoint list items and send emails, basic stuff like that, without using flow at all. All right, so I am creating a connection here and then I'm getting one. So let's see what that looks like. So these are going to be, it's just going to list me all the same ones. So let me find SharePoint here. Where'd it go? Okay, so I'm creating a connection and getting one. And then this is going to be a connection name. I'll just call it test SharePoint. And then I need to have my connector ID. So this, where I'm getting the connector, I can actually, I'll rename this. So I'll say get SharePoint connector. And then I will rename this other one, create weather. I'm not sure about the nomenclature with connection versus connector. I think they're the same things. I'm not sure why they're calling them two different things in here. We'll see in a minute, I guess. For your flow definition, it has to be, you have to have JSON. All right. So my flow, we'll look at that too in a minute. Okay, so let's look at the connection references. Giving it a name does not need to be anything technical. It can just be, see, I'm just typing text in here. But the connector ID is where I'm going to need to have an actual, like, have gotten a specific connector or created one, I think. Connector ID. Yeah, see, when I create one, I get the connector ID. That's interesting that I get the connector ID from one that I create, but I don't get the connector ID from one that I get. See, there's no connector ID here. All right, good to know. Okay, so then I'm just, I'm creating a flow, but it actually needs JSON. So what is that? I am not a developer, but I'm gonna take a guess here. So I'm gonna say it's gonna need to, when it creates a new flow, it's gonna need to have the code to put in it to know what the flow, what's the flow supposed to consist of. So this isn't going to be like a nice little pretty user interface where you drag all the little boxes and create a flow. This is going to need like the raw code to create a new flow. So I will see if I can get one. So do flow, get flow. And pick my environment, of course. And then which flow do I want to get? Oh, I've got a lot of flows in here. I can't even tell by glancing at it like which ones of these are disabled or anything like that. Okay, submit SharePoint page for approval. I'm going to grab that one. That's a nice, that's a fairly new one too. I don't remember if we've covered that on Power Hour. I covered it in our training, in our Microsoft Flow training for our company. Okay, so I'm going to go get this flow, and then that hopefully would give me some JSON. Let's see. There's also this, have y'all noticed this peak code thing? This little peak code thing exists now for everything, every single action in Flow. So that is your JSON code too. So that is a way of getting the raw code having to do with any particular action in your flow. So flow definition needs to be JSON. Let's see. Body. Now, a lot of this stuff I can just go run the flow and just see what it looks like and just kind of see what it gives me and kind of dig in and drill into all these little actions to see the code and what they're doing and what they're getting. So I'm just guessing that flow definition is going to need to have the body of this flow that I'm getting, which I think would be the code. All right, so then it's creating a flow. It's going to be called test SharePoint, and it's going to have the body of that page approval flow, and it's going to have, now that would break, I would think, because it's getting the only connector it's going to have in it is that weather one. So this is probably going to bomb out, but I want to run it and just be able to see what some of this data is. So that's the awesome thing about Flow, is that you can just quickly test things, and then once you test it, you can completely drill in and get into the guts of it and see what the heck it's doing, right? Shay says, create a flow for a site and then save the site as a template, hoping the flow would copy for each site created using that template. Nope. No, flows are completely separate. It's a completely separate thing from a SharePoint site. So the site itself doesn't know like a list of any of its flows. So you'd have to do that separately. Well, that's a good one to ponder, because that was a great thing about SharePoint Designer, is when you took that whole site, saved it as a template, it took the flow with it. But saving a site as a template is not really a thing anymore, right, Joelle?
Yeah, site design has replaced that. There is something where you can trigger a flow when a site design runs. I'm not sure exactly what their flow needs to do, but that might be a potential thing to look into, because there is now a JSON for that. It's a little complicated though. It definitely requires some advanced flow knowledge to get it to work. But yeah, I mean,
definitely not as easy as it was.
No, definitely not.
So,
and I'm not, like I said, I'm not even sure if that will apply to what they're talking about. You know what I mean? Because it triggers a flow. It doesn't necessarily have a flow sitting there on your, you know what I mean?
So that's a great point, Joelle. So the site designs that Joelle talked about last week, that's the new way of saving a site as a template. That's a new way of doing site templates. So the save a site as a template, I feel like, is going away, because I see it less and less places. It's only in the classic sites, and those are kind of fading away. So when you do a site design and you can let it trigger a flow, think about it. You can have it trigger a flow that does this. The flow can be a flow management flow, right?
Right.
So then the flow management flow can create the flow that would go on that site, maybe. Yeah. So that's my theory.
That's a potential option.
But yeah, that is like pro level right there.
Very complicated.
Okay, yeah. So let me go ahead and run this. I don't remember triggering it before. I'm not sure why it's failed already, but we'll see. Oh, it failed at getting the weather connection. I'll just do a SharePoint one. SharePoint. Now typically you don't need to have more than one SharePoint connector. So yeah. Okay. Let's see. Let me rename this. So when I create a connector, I'm trying to rename this and it's telling me, I can't rename it because it's being used somewhere, but I'm not using it anywhere. That's annoying. See, it's grayed out. See, this is very Devi right here. So to create the SharePoint connector, you have to give it your authentication type, but it doesn't tell you what that means. Like, what is it? Claims maybe? So let's see, find. No. Yeah, see, the one thing that I need to figure out how to do, it's not, it's not giving me any of that. I'm just going to type claims here. No idea. And then, oh, this is my Wonderlord tenant. That's weird that you have to like hard code your name and password in here. But a connector is I mean, that's what the connector consists of, is your authentication information. So it makes total sense. But yeah, and also we have multi-factor. So how's that going to work, right? Oh wait, no, we don't have multi-factor in this tenant. This is just my test tenant. So maybe it will work. Oh, see, yeah, I have to like type it. Like, it's not going to have like little dots on it or anything like that. Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Don't want to do that.
Okay, well, that's odd that it makes you create a brand new connector just to be able to get the ID for the connection in here. What if I don't put a connection reference and see if it will still go? So I got the flow. I'll put the body back in here, and I want to just delete this, but it won't let me. So I'm just gonna have to delete like everything. That's a kind of a buggy thing, isn't it? Having to, oh, there we go. There, keeping it simple. So it gets the flow, then it creates a flow. So to me, this is the way you could automate creating flows based off of, like, by getting that JSON code and having like flows be a copy of another flow. But I think there's a lot you'd have to do. I mean, you'd think you'd want to have something different along them, like what SharePoint site they're connected to, right? So I would think that you would need to have somehow have variables in there. Okay, flow display name, test, flow, from flow. This is a test. And then my flow state is going to be started, no connections. And then, oh, the definition is the one that needs to be the body here. Okay. Oh, it's actually running. I can't wait to see what it's going to look like with the get flow stuff. So let's go look at it. Failed, but that's okay. I want to go look at this. So when I get a flow, so I got my submit SharePoint page for approval flow, and this is my flow definition. Okay, the flow definition is all that JSON code. And then the connection references, that's good to know. Those are the connections that I'm using. It's got notification services, the raw data about the connections I'm using. And then it's got my trigger and all my actions all in there kind of separately. And then it's got all this other, again, it's very raw data. So then, of course, my flow didn't work. My flow definition is probably, let's go see what the error looks like. Yeah, the request content was invalid. Could not find member name on an object of type flow template. Interesting. Huh, okay. I'm going to go, you know what I'm going to do is for the get flow, I'm going to go ahead and just create a really, really, really simple flow. And then that way I'll get that one. And so it'll just be like super simple and not have a bunch of like a whole big long list of connections and all that, like the one was that I got. And that way, hopefully we can, that's what we do when we're troubleshooting, right? Is we start simple and we break it down instead of trying to like start with getting a really giant complex flow that's got 15 connectors in it and a whole bunch of conditions and actions. So let's go over to, I'll go ahead and save that. I think, yeah, it's already saved. And I'll do a very, very simple flow that is just got a manual trigger flow button. And then all it's going to do is set a variable. That's it. Okay, so that way I don't need a connector. I don't need anything in it. I'm just going to, super simple, initialize a variable. There. And make sure this runs. It's not going to run. That's fine. Run now. Okay, it successfully started. Most simple flow ever, and it succeeded. So that one is called, I got to rename it. Super simple. Put it at the top of the list, start with an A. There. Larry says, one thing lack of site templates is hampers the ability to easily mirror a site to use as a sandbox for testing. Yeah, but that whole sandbox for testing thing, I mean, who actually does that and why? You got to think about why you need sandboxes for testing. That's usually like a very dev thing, and there's not as much dev now in SharePoint Online. Okay, so this is, okay, test. Okay, test management is what I'm calling it. I'm going to get a flow, and that is going to be the one that I called a simple one. And then I'm going to create a flow from, let me make sure I'm getting the right piece here. Here's API definition. That might be what I need. So I might have just put the wrong thing in there. We'll just make sure. Let me look at this. Definition summary, flow definition, that's the exact same thing. So that's what I need. And then flow state started. And then do I need to do the connection? I don't have any connections, so I don't need to worry about what my connectors are. But yeah, I could probably do get connectors from a flow. Anyway, all right, let's just try this. Because I want to create this test flow from flow. I want to get it to actually do something. And then we're gonna go into the template that Microsoft provides and see how cool that is for admin management. So it got the flow and created a flow. It worked. Yay! Golf clap. Okay, so now when I go look at my flows, let's go see where's this going to be listed. Let me refresh this just in case. Oh, look at that. It did it twice. Interesting. So it put a 2 after it the second time it created it. So let's go look at this. Look at that. So there's my whole flow, and it's a copy of it. Pretty cool. So, all right, now let's go over to this flow. There is a power. This is the report that it will email me. So this is going to be a list of all the new flows, power apps, and connectors in my tenant in that certain time frame. So these are, look, you can tell this is a bunch of test stuff that I'm doing, but these are all new connectors that I've created. So this is the output of this template that Microsoft provides. So here is the flow. It's called Get a List of New Power Apps, Flows, and Connectors. And Joelle put a screenshot of the other one that's a template with notifying you just when the number of flows reaches a certain number. So I'll show you how this works.
And just to say, there was others, but they were basically just what you're doing, just split out. Like, so get a list of your connectors, or so it was just the same thing that this one's doing. That was the only one that was slightly different.
Oh, okay. It looks like we're doing a whole bunch of stuff with arrays in here. We're actually in our flow class that we're teaching, we're actually going to have a whole section in there about dealing with arrays and lists of stuff in flows. Because I know during Power Hour, I'll kind of start throwing some of this out, but Power Hour is always just a random demo of something. I haven't really explained it all, but yeah, in the class we're going to be like actually teaching it. And I say we because Joelle and I are both like, and Chris too, we're all collaborating on this this material. All right. So once a day, it's first of all, when you use variables in Flow, you have to initialize them first, and you always have to initialize them right at the beginning of the workflow. So all this is doing is just initializing a bunch of arrays, just basically to turn them on, just to say that you want to use them later. So it looks like a lot, but all it is doing is saying that I want to use all these array variables. An array is a list of stuff. I'm not a dev, but I know that much. Okay, so I'm going to go get environments. So that's one thing that you have to tell it this API version, the date value of the API, and it just has this hard-coded number in here. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure where that comes from. That was just in here. But it's just going to get all the environments. So I guess if you just wanted to do this on one environment, you wouldn't have to go get them all first. But again, it's a template, so Microsoft's just, accommodating for you might have many environments. So then the first thing it's going to do is for each, so it's going to get all these environments, and then for each environment, see the apply to each has this icon in it. For each environment, the first thing it's going to do is say, what is the current environment? So that way, as it loops through this whole thing, it's just going to do this whole loop for each environment you have. So it's going to say, what is my current environment? And it's going to get this output of, see, this is all the information about the environment itself. So this is just going to give me the display name of the environment, see display name. So that's what it got. That's what it's got here. And then simultaneously, look at this. So it's got a parallel branch here. Simultaneously, it's going to go list all the flows, list all the connectors, and get all the apps. So this is not just for Flow. It's going to get all my Power Apps too. So I'm going to list my flows, list flows as admin for that environment. All it's doing is it's just doing this action and it's telling it that environment. There's not much to it. List all the connectors. All you do is you tell it the environment and you get all the apps. And all we're doing is telling it the environment API version. And so then for each of these things, it's just doing those all at the same time for efficiency. And then for each flow that it finds, it's going to look in this time frame. Now, I think it'd be more efficient if you could, when you're going to get all the flows, list all the flows, if you could narrow it down there instead of having to go get all of them and then narrowing it down, right? I guess that's the only option you have because there isn't like a query option in here. So then you're looking to see if it's in our window. So what is our window? Ticks. So we're looking at the created time of the flow, and we're looking for is greater than in our reporting period. So what is the reporting period? So this is one of the variables it's initializing. All it's doing is saying it's putting as a -7, just the number -7. So it's going to take this -7 number, and then it's going to when it's initializing all the variables, it's setting a value in them as it's initializing them. So you don't have to do a separate like initialize and then set a variable. So it's initializing and setting this to -7 so that it's a week. Now, if you're going to do this recurrence as in, I have it going one day, then you'd want it to be like all the flows in that day, right? So for something that runs once every 7 days, then the -7 makes sense. So you're going to want your recurrence to match that number, to match that negative number here, so that it's looking like once a week, it's going to go get all the stuff for that week, right? So then it's going to, I don't know why they call this ticks, but it's called a reporting period ticks. And that's going to add days to now. And that is really, so it's called add days. It's an add days function expression, but it's really doing a negative number. So even though it's called add days, you can still subtract as long as you put a negative number in here. So that number is a -7. So it's basically taking today minus 7. So that's how you're getting that time period. So it's got today minus 7. So then it's taking, see, it's checking to see if it's created in that window of time. So today minus 7 is greater than reporting period ticks, or let's see. Yeah, created time of the flow. That's where it's comparing. It's looking at the actual flow and looking at created time of it. And then it's comparing that to say it's greater than 7 days ago, right? So then it would be, oh, whatever, 7 days ago right now was February 27th. So as long as it's greater than February 27th, that way it's going to give me stuff in the last week. Y'all got that? I think y'all, it's just logic, right? I think y'all understand that. Okay, so then it's going to get a user profile, and it's going to go get the creator. So this is just going to give me, it's got to give me that data about, let's go look at that data about the flow. And it's going to give me the creator object ID. So this is interesting. So my husband made a funny the other day about flow, and he said, if you think that you're creating too many actions and when you're creating flows, you're probably doing it right. It's because it's a lot of the times it seems like you're having to create so many extraneous actions to get simple data that you think you'd need. So here I want to just get like the person's name, right, that created the flow. Well, all it gives me is this creator object ID, which is like a GUID, like a unique ID of a person, or maybe their email address, but I want to get like other stuff about them, just like their display name. So this is just like a unique ID that's all it gives me. See, when it gets the flow. So then this get user profile is what I use to go get like the pretty information about them. I could get their name and their department, their manager, all kinds of stuff like that. So let's see. And then, so as it's looping through all the flows, it's appending to this array. So it's like adding to a list basically, so that it's gathering for each flow. It's just adding to the end of the array so that it ends up having one big list of stuff. So it's appending to the array, and it's saying, here's what the environment is, flow display name created by, see, the display name of the person that created it, as opposed to some GUID. And then the name of the flow and the time the flow was created. See, let's go look at, say, I get this all the time, right? Looking through these emails that get generated, I'm looking for one that's got flows in it. That's fun. Like, I never create any new flows. Oh, there we go. So here, this is exactly what it's generating, this list of stuff. So flow display name, created by, flow ID, and flow creation time. So this is like the output that it's getting for each flow. So then all it's doing is appending it all into a variable. So for each flow, that's what it's doing. It's just getting this list of stuff. And then same thing applies to all the connectors. It's going to say for each connector that it finds in the environment, it's going to do the exact same thing. It's going to go get just that small amount of time, only connectors that were created in that time. And then only if they were created in that time frame, it's going to go append those to a separate array, a little separate list of stuff. And then all the Power Apps. So it's going to say for all this environment, for each Power App that it finds, same exact thing. I have to go look to see if it was created in that time frame, go get the user profile. So for the flow, when I was getting the the name of the person that created the flow. In this case, I'm just looking at this data about the Power App. So get apps, and I'm getting the ID, Power App Creator. Look how ugly this is. It's a bunch of fields called ID. That's not messy or anything. I mean, come on. So yeah, so here's the creator. So that's why it just says ID, because that's what it's called. So you have to go to this specific ID, and that's the Power Apps creator. So it's going to go get the user profile for that person so that it can get their first name, last name. And then same exact thing, it's appending it to this array. And so that's a really good use of all those different flow admin things. And then it puts it all together. It creates a flow HTML table. And then it's just basically saying create an HTML table given this flow array, the one from that first branch, flow, create an HTML table. Then from the list of Power Apps, create another HTML table. And then from the list of connectors, create another. So it's going to give me 3 different HTML tables. And then in the email, see, it's just inserting the 3 HTML tables. And so that then it looks like this, where it's got new flows, and there's your HTML table, new Power Apps, and there's another one, and then connectors would be the 3rd HTML table. So that's how it lists all those out. Let's go look at, we've got like 15 more minutes left. Any questions about how that works? Pretty neat, right? To go get all those. And that is a template that you can just use that already exists. Let me go ahead and save this. All right, and I'll go back to my flows. Oh, look, it kept doing it. Uh-oh. So, yeah.
Uh-oh, that's scary.
Yeah, I created an infinite loop. So, oh, look, my recurrence is every 1 minute. Maybe I shouldn't have done it based on recurrence. Maybe I should have done it just based on a manual trigger.
Yeah, probably good idea.
Every 1 minute, create a new flow. Ah, okay. That's too funny. Okay, so I'm gonna have to go clean some of those up. And then, so now I've got all these, all these copies of this flow with all the numbers after them. Let's see if I can work with that. Let's see what I can do with that just for fun. I'll create another, just a manually triggered one. And then, Anne wants to know when government is going to get Power Apps and Flow. I thought that was like last July that they were going to get it. I work with government a lot, and they went ahead and just got Power Apps, one of the Power Apps and Flow plans. And then if you get the plan, then you have it. So anyway. All right, I'm going to type flow here. Flow management. And let's look at, we haven't taken a look at Microsoft Flow for admins yet. And I'm pretty sure you actually do have to be an admin in the tenant to do this. Joelle, can you go into the Wonderlara tenant? And I'm pretty sure you're not a Flow admin in there, and see what happens when you try to create a Microsoft Flow admin action. Like, because it's going to make you authenticate just to create the connector. And I want to see if it gives you an error.
Okay. You said which one?
Go into the Wonderlara tenant and just go try to create a flow and use one of these Microsoft Flow for admins actions. And just see just if creating the action, just creating the connector in the first place gives you an error, or if it lets you do it. Because I don't think you're an admin over there. All right, so disable flow as admin. Edit flow owner role as admin. That is interesting. I wonder if it adds someone or just adds an additional owner, or like completely changes the owner. I'm going to try that. Enable flow, get flow user details. Remove flow approval. Remove flow as admin. Ooh, I'm going to try the remove flow approval. Interesting. Okay. So I'm going to say edit flow owner role because I have all these extraneous flows now that I can try this out with. So this is where it, see, did you see that? It was authenticating me to make sure that I'm an admin. This is actually a new connector. So my environment name, I have to give it the name of my environment. So I have to go get, I'll go get that. Flow. I don't remember the name of my environment. Flow management. I guess I could go look up here at what the name of my environment is, but yeah. Okay, get environment. List my environments. Okay, and the environment name. So basically for each environment, it's going to do that. That's fine. It just says environment name, so I guess it just means the display name. And then the name of the flow. So now I need to know it's not giving me a drop down. So remember one of the actions I was doing a minute ago to do something with the flow, it actually gave me a list of choices of flows to pick from. So I'm actually going to go over here and just look at what the name of I'll just say like test flow from flow 11. I'll just grab that name. Hopefully that'll work. Just text. It doesn't seem like it would, but flow permission ID. See, this is all very raw here. Edit flow on a role as admin. So that's who I want to delete from being an admin of the flow, and then who I want to add. Interesting. That is very raw data. Huh. So I'm going to go get some more information here. Flow get get flow as admin, get flow owner role, get flow user details. And that's probably gonna I'm trying to see what this is going to give me, because I need to have all like email, display name, ID. I'll just get my own. How about that? So I'll just do user information, get my profile. So this is just going to get my profile, the person running the flow. Okay, so I'm just going to make it put me in there. So now here I have all this raw data about myself. Mail, display name, ID, so that's going to be like my user ID here, I believe. Flow permission principal type. What the heck? I don't know. Owner. Role name. I don't know. We'll just see what it tells me. Oh, thanks, Sean. Oh, thanks, Zach. Yeah, Zach gave Anne the roadmap link to go see when it's supposed to hit the government tenant. I feel like they've been announcing that it's going to the government like in multiple times, and it still hasn't happened because I feel like it was supposed to be last July. But yeah, maybe they're pushing it out. Okay, so I'll go ahead and run this. Make sure I save it. Run now. And I'm pretty sure it's going to bomb out because I was just manually typing in some of that data. Joelle, did you get a chance to try?
Yeah, let me add it.
Oh, it lets you. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe like it did try to authenticate and then it let me do it.
Oh, okay.
So.
All right. It got, of course, this errored, which I expected it to error. Let's see what the error is. Edit action, edit flow owner role as admin failed. Duh. I know that much. The provided environment name, Laura Test, has these invalid characters. The name can only be a letter to. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, let me just go get that specific environment name so that I can just type that one in that I want, the main one. Okay, so this is display name. See, Laura Test is the one that it didn't like. Test CDS is the other one. And then this one is this is the main environment name that I use. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to see if it will let me just put that environment instead of doing this each thing. There. And then see, then I won't have to have it in a loop because it'll just be the one environment. Delete my whole loop. Delete that. Save. Yeah, so a lot of these are in preview, as you can see. So when flow actions are in preview, you are going to notice that a lot of it is like very raw type of information that it expects with. So it's really difficult to figure out in a lot of cases what exactly needs to be in some of these fields, which of course it's in preview. So that's kind of what that's kind of what I expect for some of these newer ones. So with these, it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to take a lot more time to go in and figure out and test and to figure out what it needs. See, the provided environment name has these invalid characters. So it doesn't like, I don't know, it doesn't like spaces in the environment name, except my environment name has spaces in it. So maybe it needs like an environment ID and it's confused. So this is the kind of thing that makes building flows take a really long time. Because you're having to like troubleshoot all these little, again, like because it's a preview, you're having to go and troubleshoot all these tiny little things. So what I'm going to go do now is go look at that raw data again and go look at where it's listing my environments and go get like a GUID. See, this is the display name of the environment right here. But I feel like if I just get, see, this is the ID, this whole thing right here. Now, I'm not sure why the ID has a whole bunch of, it looks almost like a path. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. So I'm going to take that and use that as my environment name. I'm just going to try one more thing and then we'll move on to something else. So, get my profile at my, hold on. Get my profile. This is the one I was doing, right? Yeah, okay. Environment name. That is a weird environment name. Good thing testing it is so fast, right? That's what I love about Flow is the ability to test it really fast and not have to go to a bunch of trouble to re-trigger flows. It's just a single click. And it's gonna fail. Okay, so that's fine. Let's see if it got farther this time though. Access to the environment providers is denied. So it tried to look at this as the environment name right here. So I think that it really wants this thing. Because that to me would be the GUID of the environment. I'm going to try that now. I wouldn't think that it would just want like a big long string of text. I would think it would need something that's more like a unique ID. It didn't like the spaces, so it didn't want just like the regular name, even though it does say environment name. Can't exactly rename environments, right? Let's see if it liked that. Could not find flow. Okay, so now, remember it said flow name? And I just said, well, I wouldn't think that it would just want the name. I would think that it would want unique ID. And sure enough, now it doesn't like that flow name. So it's going to want something. Now, let me show you how to go get a flow unique ID. So I'll go open this one. And then I go up here. So when I'm looking at the flow, this little GUID here at the very end, right before it says details, that is my unique ID of my flow. So I'm going to take that and put that here as my flow name. And then I'm sure some of this other stuff is going to bomb out too, but like, you know, we're working through understanding the technicalities behind some of this. Oh, okay. Sean says, he did a flow that calculates the number of days since a file has been updated. Oh, good idea. And he put the code there in the, his expression there in the chat. That's cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so that one failed. What error did it give this time? The request content was invalid and could not be deserialized. Okay, so that's the part where I just typed the word owner because I didn't know what it wanted here. It's just a big blank text box. So that does not like the word owner. But anyway, so I don't know, I have no idea what it's expecting right here, but you get the gist. So these, it looks like the flow management for admins, those actions are going to be a lot more raw and harder to work with than the ones that are the flow management actions. So let's go back to look at another one. Oh, I'll just go wipe this one out. Got a couple more minutes. And let's see, we'll just kind of look at a couple more. Okay, connector, get flow as admin. List connectors. Now, a lot of this stuff also where you can go get flows and get owners and look at all this information about your flows, you can do that in Flow Admin. So anytime you want to just go look at your list of flows and owners, you can go to your Flow Admin. It's the Flow and Power Apps. It's all in the same place. And you can go in there and see all of them and go click on any of them and add yourself to as an owner to any of them. You can do all that stuff just manually. So this is really only going to be for situations where you need to go, have some of that stuff automated or send you an email. So this one's going to do an update flow. So it's a little tricky because, what exactly are you updating? There's not much. Again, it's raw code. So this flow definition thing, when I go point to what flow that I want, and then I'm basically like changing the whole flow. So I'm taking an existing flow and I'm basically taking like the JSON code of what the flow needs to be comprised of, and I'm putting a whole different set of code in here. So that's very advanced. Let's do a different one. One more. I'll look at the flow for admins. There aren't really any triggers. Where did they go? That is weird. There we go. So I can imagine that in bigger environments, when you have just the Wild West of anybody just creating whatever flows they want, and sharing with them, and they're just kind of all over the place, and you don't know how many you have or who's doing what. I can imagine this would be a great way to go really like get detailed information, maybe on an automated basis of all that data, so that you can get an idea of the quantity and get an idea of what people are doing with their flows. But then also, if you want to do something like you're talking about with a site template and using a site design, to where you could have the site design create, have that action that Joelle was talking about where it triggers a flow. So as it uses this site design, it implements it to create a new site, triggering a flow is one of the things that it can do. So that would I can imagine, Joelle, that it would let you have some sort of input parameters when you do that. So I would think that, because when you trigger a flow, you can have a manual trigger that gives it input parameters. So I can imagine that you can have this create flow thing have an input parameter here, like text, and then when it creates the flow, it can give it sorry, it can give it your input as the name of the flow, and that way, via your scripting, you could have it make the flow name have something to do with the name of the site that it just created. But then, of course, this is going to be a lot of very raw data that you're dealing with. It's going to take a lot of understanding kind of the raw connectors and what you want your flow to be able to do as far as what's specific to that site. So that's going to be a little tricky, because if you're going to have, in this case, if you're going to have a flow related to a specific site, then in your flow, in all the SharePoint actions, you're going to need to have that be a variable, right? So in the flow that it's creating, like the definition here, it's going to have to use, how when you're using SharePoint actions, it's got a drop down that tells you to pick your SharePoint site. So that value that it uses for the SharePoint site is going to have to be a variable. It's going to have to be like from an input parameter, right? So then that's another thing to consider, because the simple flow that I created had no connectors. It wasn't going to a SharePoint site or anything, but that's something that you'll have to work in there, is having a lot more variables in your flow so that it will just work on whatever, site that you apply it to. All right, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Flip back over to, was that interesting? What do you all think? You're going to go try it out? It's a lot of management stuff, but it's also a lot of, like I said, having to do with templates. I think there's a lot of power there, and then being able to take an entire flow and automate making copies of it. Because of course you could take any flow and click save as and make a copy of it, but this is a good way of automating that and making copies of a flow and automatically setting the owners of that new flow and etc. So yeah. Thanks everybody for coming. Don't forget to register for the SharePoint conference that's coming up in Las Vegas in May. I can't wait. I'm going to be teaching an all-day post-conference Power Apps and Flow workshop there. So here's the code you see on the screen when you register. You use my discount code Rogers to get your $50 off. And also there's going to be a Power Apps Virtual Summit. I just wrote a blog post about that yesterday. It's the Collab 365 people. So that is coming up in a few weeks. There are a couple of different ways you can register for it. You can just register for free and watch it live. But if you want to be able to see it on demand, or if you're not available when they're broadcasting it live, there's a, you can buy it. There's an early bird price of $49 to be able to go pay that, to be able to get not only all that on-demand content, but a whole bunch of other stuff they're throwing in, like ebooks and training and things like that. So thanks everybody for coming, and enjoy creating your flows and have a good week. All right, over and out.